So let's begin with the first basic unit, and that is the small snowflake. I'm going to show you how to do two arrangements of snowflakes, although there are many, many more. Using on worksheet 1, this might seem like a waste of time, but I'd like you to get into the habit of indicating beginning and ending pairs that go into the shape by first drawing stubs. Well, the other way around. Color-wise, because green would start and red would end. Once you have your stubs showing the pairs that come in from the ground and the pairs that exit from the motif, you also have pin positions. And the first, and then you can draw in the motif. If you were to make it on the pillow, first two pairs would cross, make a stitch, then you'd bring in the second pairs from the incoming pairs. They would cross in the middle, and then they would the inside pairs would work, and then the outside pairs would work, completing the stitch and creating the small snowflake like that. First, draw in the stubs, showing you where and how many pairs come into the shape that you want to work in the cloth stitch. And then indicate in a second color all the pairs that exit the shape and need to become part of the ground again. Plot in the pinpoints, and for the small snowflake you would need 4 pinpoints, although there are other arrangements of pins for snowflake grounds, small snowflake grounds as well. But this is a familiar one and a useful one. The first two inside pairs make a cloth stitch. Bring in a pair from the left, pair from the right. They work through the pairs that just crossed. They cross on the inside, and then you complete the shape. First, plot in the stubs of the incoming pairs, the outgoing pairs, pinpoints, pin markings, and then you can plot the shape. If you reason it out as you would on the pillow, and if you plot it out, that would help a lot with later more elaborate motifs. So this really seems like a long way around, but if you can reason the workings of the thread movements out this way, it'll make your life much easier later on. So the topmost two pairs, they work through each other. Then you bring in the edge pairs, the second incoming pairs. The inside pair makes a stitch, the outside pairs make stitches, and then the inside pair makes the final stitch. Pin markings, and then plot in the stitch. The topmost pairs make the first stitch. They are the inside pairs. The outside pairs work through each other, one on each side. The inside pairs make a stitch, then the outside pairs make a stitch, and then the inside pairs make a stitch. The legs of the snowflake, they need twists. You can plot them in if you like. I like to keep that open-ended because I might work with a thread density that only allow one twist, so indicating two might then just be confusing. But that would look like on a pair diagram, you'd indicate the amount of twists that you want before the cloth work. Now this makes the pattern a little bit bulky, so I just, for my own patterns, just work without those indications. Last one before I leave you be. To practice on your incoming pairs. Outgoing pairs, the pairs that become part of the ground again. Pin markings. And then reason out the stitch. Incoming pairs cross. Outside pairs cross. And by cross I mean they make a cloth stitch. So the lines cross, but the actual stitch is a cross, twist cross. Inside pairs cross. Outside pairs cross. Inside pairs work together and the shape is complete. Inside pairs, outside pairs. Inside pairs, outside pairs. Inside pairs. Inside, outside. Inside, outside. Inside. Inside, outside. Inside, outside. Inside. Continue the rest of the worksheet until you are very familiar with the stitch, how to make it, and also how to draw it. When you have finished the first exercise, your worksheet should look something like this. I found that using a felt tip marker makes it easier to plot the pin markings because you simply need to press a single dot and you save some time. I find that working with a fountain pen makes a beautiful calligraphic line, but it is a little bit too thick for this graph paper. in the end I settled on an 0.3 fine line pen to create the shape, and this is a good pen to draw with on this graph paper. Just a quick note on the small snowflake. These motifs are not aligned on this worksheet as they would be in a normal small snowflake ground. That is because I wanted to make you aware of the ring pair, the shape within which each individual snowflake motif falls on the Sparrow's graph paper, and that is the equivalent of 4 hexagons. And that is the equivalent of 4 hexagons on a Paris ground paper. So whenever you encounter a motif of your own design or otherwise that has this peculiar little shape in which 4 Paris ground stitches fits in perfectly, then this is an option what you can do with them. Even if it's part of a compound shape later, if the shape ends in an area that is approximately the size, you can have this thread movement happening there. And then just to give you an indication, if you're working directly on Paris ground graph paper, the pin markings be there. On the vertical side of the little triangle. Let's move on to the second small snowflake motif. This one's much easier. Like before, start by gauging how many pairs are coming into the shapes. On a more elaborate design, it is easy to miss an incoming pair, especially at corners of more complex shapes. So take care to make sure that every pair that hits the ring pair of the motif is accounted for. And make the stub really small, no more than a slight comma or an elongated full stop. If you make the line too long, then you won't have enough space to manipulate the shape of the cloth work inside. That one, for instance, might be a little bit long already. The exiting pairs, the pairs that are exiting the clothwork motif. Draw in the pin markings. And the felt tip pen zips through that. Don't make these pinpoints too small, because you might want to reduce this design to work with a very, very fine thread, and then a minuscule little dot disappears on a photocopy machine or a printer if you reduce the size. Now the second snowflake variation, which looks very beautiful when it is tiled, it creates this undulation flow of threads when it's tiled in a checkerboard shape. This is the perfect summary of Bince Flanders clothwork. You work with two pairs surrounding a pin. The pair underneath the pin becomes a weaver. The pair above the pin becomes a passive. The weaver that you've just made weaves across to the other side and through the next two incoming pairs. After which it becomes abandoned as passive, and because this motif is so small, it gets thrown out immediately. The two incoming pairs that it just wove through, they do the same thing. The pair above the pin becomes a passive thread, and the pair below the pin becomes a new weaver. The weaver weaves across through all the passives and gets thrown out at the end of the motif. And when you throw out a weaver, you need to throw out a passive too. Let's try that again. The pair above the pin becomes a passive thread, and the pair below becomes a weaver. They work through each other. The weaver shoots across to the other side, through the incoming pairs, and gets thrown out. The pairs that the incoming pairs do the same. The pair below the pin becomes a weaver. The pair above the pin becomes a passive thread. The weaver weaves through all the passives and at the end of the shape gets thrown out. And every time you throw out a weaver, you need to throw out a passive too. Continue practicing this motif in the same way, working it out step by step as you would on the pillow, drawing little stubs. First you make a new weaver and a passive combo. The weaver weaves through the incoming pairs. The new incoming pairs create a new passive and weaver combo. The weaver weaves through all the passives, gets thrown out at the end of the shape, and when you throw out a weaver, you need to throw out a passive. Make a new weaver. The weaver weaves through the incoming pairs on the other side, and the incoming pairs become a new weaver passive combo in of itself. When you reach the area in your worksheet that is unprompted, where you have to work on your own without the visual guide, try to reason out the thread movements again. The incoming pairs on one side, you need to create a weaver first, and the other one becomes a passive. The weaver weaves through the incoming pairs on the other side. It gets abandoned. You create a new weaver from those two incoming pairs, and the new weaver gets thrown out. Try to get this shape first so that you get an idea that the weaver catches the next two incoming pairs surrounding the pin at the top. And then you can abandon the weaver as a passive and it gets thrown out. You create a new weaver, and the weaver gets thrown out, and then a passive 2. Don't skimp on this exercise because this is an essential thread movement to nail. So, and let's move on to large snowflakes.